Gateway, versioning, deployment strategies. Let's take a look at how you can use API Gateway stage variables to add flexibility to your deployment strategy. Amazon API Gateway comes with a feature called stages. A stage is a named reference to a deployment, which is a snapshot of the API. A stage is used to manage and optimize a particular deployment across multiple different environments, such as a dev and prod environment. An extension of this is a concept called stage variables, which are name-value pairs that you can define as configuration attributes associated with a deployment stage of a REST API. They act like environment variables that store dynamic values. With stage variables, you can invoke a dev stage resource and a prod stage resource and point them to resources like a Lambda function or a URL. After creating your API, you can use stage variables to integrate a resource by using the following convention during API deployment. $, open curly brackets, stage variables.variable_name, close curly brackets. The variable name value could be .lambda or .url, depending on what you are integrating. This will dynamically retrieve the proper value for that variable defined in the API Gateway stage settings. This design pattern avoids hard coding, which makes it easy for developers to deploy and push code into production, especially with an automated CI/CD pipeline. To get a better sense of how this works, let's look at an example of integrating a single API with two Lambda functions using stage variables. First, create an API in API Gateway, choose Lambda function as the integration type, and use the naming convention, $stagevariables.myfunction, in the Lambda function field. Normally, you would provide the name of the Lambda function you want to integrate with your API, but instead, a stage variable is used to reference that function. Next, you will need to manually add permissions via the CLI to invoke both Lambda functions that will be integrated. Now, deploy your API to a dev and a prod stage. After deployment, navigate to the stage editor for each stage and provide the stage variable suffix, myfunction, in the name field, and the name of the Lambda function, in the value field for each stage. With this configuration, the production stage and dev stages of the same method will invoke two different Lambda functions. That's it. This is how you can optimize your Amazon API Gateway resources by using a single method with two stages to test two different Lambda functions. This methodology can be used with URLs, URIs, mapping templates, and integration credentials. Stage variables can also map back to versions and aliases of Lambda functions. Inside of Lambda, there is a concept called versions, which is an incrementing number that represents your code at a certain point in time. Once you create a Lambda version, you can assign an alias name to the version. In API Gateway, you can assign a Lambda alias to a stage variable that points to the appropriate environment. You can then shift traffic from Lambda version 1 to version 2 without additional coding. You can also control shifting of API traffic using canaries. Canaries allow you to direct a percentage of traffic between two different stages. For example, you can send 10% of traffic to version 1 of a Lambda and send 90% to version 2. This allows you to explore a new code version and gain feedback on stability before moving the majority of users to a new code version. Or you can use canaries for migrating on-premises code to AWS, method by method, or action by action.